right, we will go ahead and get started. We are going to first welcome everybody. I see Joni, Frida, Kelly, Patricia, and I'm not sure about Denise. So we are already recording, so we will have this, for your reference once you guys go live to circle back on. But we are going to start today with just a recap. I'm not going to go through the steps, or I should say I'm only going to go through the steps. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen from the first webinar on assessments and MDS, or second webinar. So I'm just going to recap the MDS portion, and that'll lead us into the care planning portion. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in and or use the chat box. And Lana is on with us, and she will be watching that. Thank you, Lana.
You're welcome, Vanessa. Hello, everyone.
I'm going to share my screen. Like Heidi's in. So just a reminder before we get started, I think that is the only ones on the invite, but this is healthcare related at this point when discussing the MDS and also the care planning. So we're going to look at just a recap from the MDS portion of a previous webinar. But before we do that, we're going to look at what our goals are for today for this one. Again, we're going to recap that Section F MDS process. Then we're going to move into understanding the who, what, when, where, why, and how behind the development and implementation of a person-centered care plan. We're going to look at the new process. So as far as the trilogy process for creating a person-centered care plan and how it supports our quality and compliance. We are also going to look at the translation of making sure our preferences, our resident preferences that are identified in our assessment flow through to the MDS and the care plan. And just making sure we have a clear, repeatable approach. So again, the same process will be done the same way for each resident in our health center or long-term residents. And then hopefully build confidence. You guys don't have access quite yet. That will be starting here in April by cluster. So as you go live, just building your confidence and aligning with those new expectations for care planning. All right. So we're going to move through, again, I'm not going to pull this back up on this call, but I'm going to move through these slides here for just the recap for the MDS portion. It is going to, again, just to repeat from the webinar, it is going to look foreign to you all at this point, but that is why we're recording so that we can circle back. So we know it's a regulatory requirement, and it provides a care plan for person-centered care. So that's why we capture resident preferences and routines. We do this upon admission, annual, and significant change. So that would follow your schedule that you would get from your MDS nurse. And then in MatrixCare, it's going to be listed under RAI tab at the top and MDS 3.0 assessments. And again, this is only for your healthcare skilled residents only. The process is to log into MatrixCare. So this would be your main screen. You're going to select your facility and then search here at the bottom, the blue search. Then you're going to actually click on that facility, and it's going to say HC. If you're only an HC campus or health center skilled campus, you're only going to have HC. Otherwise, you would have an assisted living option as well, where you could access your assisted living residents. Select the resident and then search your resident. So you're going to go to resident and search resident. Again, same steps we went over before. You're going to search last name, first name. You can just put in the letter and it'll bring up everybody with that last name that starts with D, whatever letter you're putting in there. And then always check active status because you want your active in-house residents and search at the bottom. So going to the MDS, again, you're going to go to RAI and then MDS 3.0 right here. And then you're going to have something that looks like this at the bottom where there might be several listings, but each review, each MDS review, so here it says admission, so this would be this resident's admission, and you're going to have a date with a link that you click on to access that MDS section F. So if that was an annual or a significant change, it would be listed as that as well, a different one. Then these are the complicated steps that most of you guys will not remember until you revisit this, but you will scroll down and select observation and events import. So on the screen, you're going to have an option. Once you enter that MDS, you're going to have an option of observation and events import. You're going to then select, again, we only want to do life enrichment. There might be several assessments listed there that have not been pulled to the MDS yet, but you're only going to worry about your life enrichment section. So you would check this box and then you would hit update. You would then select section F, so preference for customary routines and activities. That's the name of that MDS section that we complete. And then you're going to select resolve copied answers. And what that does is it pulls all of those section F answers from your assessment into the MDS automatically. So you don't have to type all those in again. And then you would save and close. So this will be a great PowerPoint to print out and have those steps in a binder for yourself in the beginning. So I would say each of these PowerPoints, I would definitely, print off when you get those so you have it as a resource. Then once section F is completed, you have to sign it so that it's fully complete. And that would be in section Z. So you would access, so A all the way to Z is going to be listed there, and you're going to choose section Z for signing. Then you're going to go to the signature of the person completing the assessment, which is the E sign. So there's going to be this little blue E sign that you click, and you're going to choose then that section F, which looks like this. So you're going to check that little box. It'll say not signed until you check the box and apply your signature. Then your name, it'll say signed. There'll be a green checkbox and your name will show up there under that section Z. And then it's fully completed. Something we didn't go over that we touched on is, as you guys know, sometimes your information will trigger a CA, which is called a care area assessment. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but just know that you'll need to check your section V to confirm if a CA, a care area assessment, was triggered for activities. If it's yellow, that means it was triggered and you'll have to proceed to complete a CA. If it's not yellow, that means the answers did not trigger further review. So your MDS nurse can provide, extra guidance on that for you guys if you have any questions on how to complete those. I did add this slide in here. I think it's really helpful to know what triggers a CA. So when you're completing the answers, you'll know right away if the resident answers are going to force a further review with a CA. So a CA can be triggered by life enrichment or social services for life enrichment. So under section D, which is the mood assessment, if the resident voices little interest or pleasure in doing things in that section D, that will automatically trigger you a life enrichment CA as well, based on, it's a depression trigger, based on little interest or pleasure in doing things. Or in the staff assessment, again, if the resident or family member is not interviewed and we have to complete the staff assessment, if we mark little interest or pleasure, that the resident displays little interest or pleasure in doing things, that will also trigger a CA for both social services and life enrichment. The flip side then is activities. So when you're doing your assessment, how we trigger our own CA is any 6 items. So when you're interviewing the resident, if there's 6 or more items that have a value of not important at all, so activities, specific activities are not important at all, or important but cannot do, or no choice, that will trigger a CA as well. Again, this is not saying don't mark those numbers. If that's the answer, if that's what applies to the resident, we still need to plug in, those numbers, those answers. But just, it's good for you guys to know what triggers a CA. And then if you do not interview the resident or the family and you complete a staff assessment review, if any 6 items L through T are not checked on the assessment. So when you're doing that assessment, if there's 6 or more items not marked applicable to that resident, it will trigger a CA as well. So just some information, and this applies for you guys in your current role too, whatever version that you're using at this point to do your assessments, that's applicable as well for Section F. All right, we're gonna move now. That ends that quick recap of the MDS that we went over in the previous webinar. So we're gonna move into care planning and how this pulls and is applicable to that. So why do we care plan? So we know the 2 main reasons is federal CMS, federal regulations, and our state regulatory requirements that we need as facilities for reimbursement and also as part of our resident rights. They have the right to that person-centered care and to have, their interests and likes and dislikes provided or not provided in a care setting. So we must ensure that the picture that each care plan paints when we start going through this matches the resident needs and preferences and what is being provided to the resident. So we don't just put things in a care plan to put them in there if they're not things that we're actually providing, because that's what will get us, as we know, the state survey tags when surveyors are looking through our care plans. And it guides our interdisciplinary team on what to provide by discipline. So who and when? So these are the primary roles of key team members involved. So when we think of our interdisciplinary team, this will include, of course, input from your resident and or family during that interview process. So whatever is marked on that assessment as important should be carried over into that care plan. Your MDS nurse, as we know, drives that process with care planning. The therapy director, director of food service, social service director, life enrichment director, and any legacy memory care leader or neighborhood director who has a skilled healthcare neighborhood. So when we think about when the care plan is completed, the Trilogy standard, so again, this isn't the federal or state regulation, the Trilogy standard is that we like to have the care plan completed within 5 to 7 business days following admission. So ideally, as a best practice, what we would call a best practice, you'll hear that word a lot. As soon as you plug in that assessment, you go right in and develop that care plan. That way you don't have to mark, to remember to go back and make sure that resident has a care plan. It's all fresh in your mind. The care plan is reviewed and updated then. So your MDS nurse will provide a MDS review schedule. So you'll know when a resident is at admission, annual or significant change, or quarterly. So you'll have those calendars provided for you so you know who to review and complete what documents. But the care plan is reviewed and updated with each of those reviews, with those quarterlies, annuals, and significant changes. So what is included? So the three main components of a care plan, it doesn't matter if it's trilogy or not, is problem and or diagnosis related to the area of concern. And what is important, the resident preferences that are somewhat important or very important to them. So those are the key components that you'll see when we look at a care plan example of things that we want to make sure we include. Then you have your goal, of course, making sure that it is specific, a SMART goal, specific, measurable, realistic, and attainable, and there's some kind of time constraint or a goal date. Then you have your approaches and interventions, and then we also mark for each of those who's responsible for those. So what disciplines are responsible, for inviting resident to activities, etc. Also in there, you want to make sure we have a section on the assessment for adaptations. So hearing, vision, cognitive, and physical adaptations that would apply to their activity engagement. You want to make sure that those are noted within your approaches as well in the care plan. So what do they need to be actively engaged? What does that resident need? So those are the three main components that we'll touch on, and you guys will see what that looks like. So now let's look at how to create. So we'll start with how to create, and then we'll go back and look at how to review after that. So the steps first of how do we create a care plan? So I'm going to hop back and forth a little bit as we go through some of these steps, and then I will show you them within MatrixCare, what you guys see on the screen as well. So the steps to creating a care plan, you're first, of course, going to log into Matrix. This is a step we've went over several times already, is logging into your facility. So again, facility, search facility. You're going to put your campus in. Nursing home is health center, is your skilled. So that is the category name for health center or skilled portion of the campus. Assisted living would be assisted living here for facility type. So you can see that down here, it's kind of small, but you see Harrison Trail Health Campus HC. So that would be the health center. So you would click on that. And then once you're within the campus page, you're going to be able to search the resident. So you're going to go to resident and then search resident. And again, you're going to look at last name. We're going to look at Sissel here from one of our campuses, and active status. So we're accessing a resident that's actively in the campus as a resident, and then search. And then that's going to take us to his page, his face sheet. So prior to drafting an activities care plan, we're going to identify the following. So it's really important that after you do the assessment, as the first step, the first bullet here is to complete the assessment. So you're going to note what did he or she say that's somewhat important or very important with their preferences. Those are the items you want to make sure carry over into that care plan once we get to that step. The other portion is also any needed adaptations, as we mentioned. So again, that's within your life enrichment assessment. There's those 4 sections of adaptations for cognitive, physical, vision, and hearing. And how you get to that, or how you find that, is within that MDS, that RAI that I showed you in the beginning. So you can look at those different sections of the MDS and look at the cognitive, physical, vision, and hearing sections to find out what they need, what their level is. The other great piece to play around with and get to know is this little eye. Just think of information. So this little eye on the resident space sheet is the information section, and that's going to take you to this over here. When you click this little eye, it's going to open up all the demographics that include the face sheet. The ICD-10, which you see highlighted here, is the diagnosis list. So you always want to check that before doing the care plan, just to find out what diagnosis, and I highlighted the ones here that might be applicable to affecting activity engagement. Okay. So there might be more than one, but you just want to kind of identify, it could be dementia for somebody. For this particular gentleman that we're going to look at, he has a right leg, absence of right leg above the knee, and then hemiplegia and hemiparesis. So he has some physical impairment that will affect his activity level. And also aphasia, some communication deficit with that aphasia down here. So you just want to kind of look at that and identify what might be applicable to carry into the care plan. So I am going to cut over and show you where to. Does everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And logged me out, so let me log back in. So here's the main screen, and I'm just in a practice platform, so I'm not affecting anything in here. So you see, this is the main screen for MatrixCare, and I'm going to Harrison Trail. Nursing home would be health center. You can see those other options in here, but we're going to pick nursing home for health center. And then I'm going to click to open that campus, health center.
Okay.
Then I'm going to go to resident, search resident, and I have Mr. Sissel already typed in there, his last name, and active. And then I'm going to go to search. And then his name will pop up down here in blue with a link to go to his face sheet.
Okay.
So I will click that. So this is what the face sheet looks like. And again, in that last picture, that little eye here, it's pretty small, but that is the information section. So this is the resident's face sheet, which we can print those like for other things that we use them for, medical appointments and such. But related to the care plan, again, you're just going to look at that eye and look at the ICD-10 just to, and this is where I got that from. He's got a very long list of diagnoses here. But those most applicable to his activity level are going to be that physical impairment that he has, okay? And that aphasia, communication deficit. So those are the key things you want to look for before you go into that care plan process. And again, you can go to RAI, MDS 3.0, what we were looking at before, and see how he has several reviews listed since he's been admitted. But let's just say we were doing his annual here. You can click on that link for annual. And then you see that section F. See how these are already signed when we were talking about the signature with the person that signed. But you can see the different sections here. So if you want to see what was put in for hearing any impairments for hearing, vision, cognition, and functional abilities, you guys can look at that right there. I always, as a best practice, look at that before you do your care plan so you know if you need to include anything for activities. So again, that'll come with practice, but that's where you find those pieces. All right. The next piece we're going to go to is the, this is what I just showed you guys and talked about. So you're going to look at the B, C, D, F, and G, G, just to look and see if there's any impairments in those other sections. Now we're going to create the care plan. So we're going to go back to that RAI and we're going to choose care plan. So instead of the MDS, we now want to draft a care plan here. Then we're going to choose add problem. And the most important piece of this is to make sure you are selecting from our created templates. So you want to make sure that you choose then select from template. So don't worry about these other two options, just select from template. These are the 9 templates that we have that you can pick from. So again, that's why it's important to look at the diagnosis and, the primary and or applicable to activities diagnoses so that you can choose what's most applicable. There might be more than one that might fit that resident, but just use your best. You can edit these once you get in there, which I'll show you. So we would pick the one most applicable. In this case, we picked physical limitations for this gentleman and would click on that. The next thing you're going to see is it's going to pull up the whole template. So you can see all these boxes that I highlighted that are checked. That means that that's going to pull that whole thing forward for you, and then you can make your edits, which we'll talk about. So you're going to look that over and check or uncheck all the boxes that you want to carry over into that residence care plan. And then you're going to hit next. So if I didn't want this approach, I could just uncheck that and hit next, and it'll carry all the rest over. Then you're going to, it's going to pull it and open up to the sections where you can make your edits. The biggest thing here is you have to personalize. So these templates were created to give you a guide, but if you don't edit them, you can see, my interests include, and here it says lists out resident interests and preferences. So that's what your care plan will say if you do not go in here and plug in what's specific to that resident. So again, this is just a template that you have to personalize and edit. So under the problem, you're going to personalize the text within this box. And the nice thing is you can spell check if you're not sure. So that'll spell check for you here on the sections and down here in the goal. Have that option you can use. Problem category, you're always going to choose, this is a little confusing, but there is activities with an S, which is our section. Make sure you pick activities with an S. There's an activity option with a Y, and that's therapy. So do pay attention to that, or else it won't flag it as an activities problem. Start date is going to auto pull, so that will auto populate the date that you're opening this, which was, I did this yesterday, pulled that open. Goal type, you're going to choose long term. So again, it'll have a goal that you can edit here, already populated. And you'll see it in the blue, but the box is where you make your edits down here. So this will show how the whole thing reads, but then down here is where you can type in and make your edits. And then your goal target date is 90 days out from whatever that MDS ARD date is. So you just want to go 90 days out. The same if you're going in to review a care plan, like for a quarterly or another review, you always have to go in and push out that goal date another 90 days. So pretty user-friendly template-wise. It'll just be getting used to the new flow of what that looks like. Then you're going to, down a little farther, it's going to go into approaches. So you're going to personalize the box content and spell check again. So it's going to have an approach, and this one's kind of small. It says, please invite and assist me as needed to activities of my interest where I may exercise my strengths and ability to participate. So if you want to reword that to something different or delete it altogether and write a whole different one in there, you can do that in this approach box right here. And again, it has the spell check option there. The start date is going to auto-populate to the day you're putting it in, so you don't have to change that. And then discipline is where you're going to mark. For this one, I put life enrichment or checked the box for life enrichment, nursing, and CRCA. But you're going to check just what's applicable to the delivery of that specific approach. So that's who's responsible for that specific approach. You don't have to check these other boxes as far as frequency, profile, flow sheet. You don't have to check any of that. And you're going to do this for every single approach that pulled forward. So you can see there's another one that starts down here. So there's going to be several approaches, each individual for that particular care plan. And we'll see what that looks like in a second. If you have to walk away, just like anything in Matrix, if you have to walk away, always save and close. It'll save it as a draft, just a word of advice. Otherwise you lose it. If you walk away, it will time out and kick you out of Matrix. So that's definitely something to make note of all the time, is always save if you have to walk away. If you plug in all these answers on this care plan and you're good to go, you can't see it as dark here, but it says activate and close. That means you're done, completely done, and you want to activate the care plan. So then you would choose activate and close instead. But if you ever have to walk away, always hit save so that it's there. So this is what that will look like, and we'll pull it up after we go through these steps. You'll go again to access Thomas's care plan. You're going to go to RAI care plan, and then it's going to pull up the different care plan options. So all the different, therapy, MDS, culinary, any department that has a care plan, you're going to see all of them, and you'll have to choose the activities care plan. So that's what this is, and you'll see category activities there. So that's why it's important that you pick that category when you're creating the care plan. If you're just going in and updating a care plan, like for a quarterly review, you're just looking to see if anything needs to change, or if anything, just making edits as needed, or none, if it's still applicable. This is what you'll go into, and you always have to mark reviewed, because this is the button that logs that you went in or someone and reviewed that care plan and said that it's still applicable. So you can make changes, anything you need to do there, but then you would mark reviewed. So I'm going to go over and click out again and show you guys what that looks like. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go to that RAI care plan. So it's going to look familiar to what the slide looked like. So this is what I mean when I said it'll pull up everybody's care plan. So any care plan that's implemented is what it pulls up. Here's the activities one. So category activities, and I'm going to click on that. So that was that screen that I had snipped in the PowerPoint. Then you're going to expand all. So we want to look at the whole care plan. So this is where you can expand all. And then we can scroll through and, review and make any edits. So you're going to look through. So just to look at his as an example for the problem. So this is assuming, of course, this being completed. We looked at his diagnosis. We looked at his hearing, vision, all the things. And this is what we found. So while in the camp, and this is from the template, the physical limitations template that was personalized. So while in the campus, I prefer to participate in self-directed independent activities. I have a diagnosis of hemiplegia or hemiparesis following a heart attack affecting right dominant side, aphasia and paraplegia, muscle weakness, unsteady on feet. I also have a diagnosis of adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood. Now, this person put a little bit more diagnosis-wise than what would be needed. So I would say the physical limitations would be the focus here in the aphasia. We could have stopped there. But either way, it's good. I do enjoy, and this is where you want to talk about now what's important to that resident based off of your assessment. So I do enjoy happy hour and sitting outdoors in the sunshine. My wife Stephanie visits me often and keeps me company. I enjoy the sport of golf and enjoyed horseback riding in the past. So you can kind of see again what is important to this gentleman here. So then his goal is to make decisions. So he's mostly independent, just with that physical impairment, make decisions and choices related for self-directed involvement in meaningful activities such as spending time with visitors and time outdoors. I will participate in group or independent activities 5 times a week of my choosing to increase mood and socialization with others. So that would be the goal with that target date. Then it's going to go into all those approaches. So each individual thing that was pulled forward in that template is listed here. I'm not going to read all of these, but just know you need to address every interest that was noted in that problem section. I always say problem/strength section. It's named different things in different systems, but so we're not just saying what the problem is, we're also saying what this person enjoys, right? What's important to me? What is my goal? And then how are we going to help him meet that goal? So just a couple things to note in here: place items within reach to decrease risk of falls. So you can see the personalization here. Companionship of animals. I have 2 dogs at home, Champ, a terrier, and Charlie, a brown lab. Please ensure my family is aware of the pet visiting policy and include me in pet visits. There's music, and again, it's specific. It's not just that I like music. What kind of music do they like? How are we going to provide music to that person specifically? Reading, outdoors. So due to my hemiplegia affecting right side, please, this one's important, set materials and supplies up on left side for ease of use. So again, we should know that, and our team should know that if that right side is impaired. Please ensure items are within reach. So just basic things, either about their interests or about adaptations that are needed for their engagement. I also have a powered wheelchair, so I will use this as transportation around the campus also, as well as that he has a standard wheelchair as well. So again, there's not a specific number approach-wise. You just want to make sure it shouldn't just be 1 or 2 approaches. You want to make sure that there's enough to address the individual interests and then any adaptations needed for activity. So some will have 4 or 5, and some might have 8 or 10, depending on the resident for that. So that's what that will look like, and you can edit. The nice thing is, if I wanted to edit this problem, so let's say he now needs one-to-ones, I could go in and, edit that to add that in there. Or the same with the goal over here in the actions. You can go to actions and edit. And then it looks like it did originally, and I can edit those sections. You do always have to say a reason. A lot of times I just say, changed content, or here I could say adjusted goal or changed goal, and then you would hit save, but it does make you put a reason in there for that. And the same with the approach. If, oops, it's not letting me go forward. If it, if you go down to like approach, if I wanted to add a new one, let's say now he needs one-to-one activity, I could add approach and then type that in there as to how we were going to deliver that. Same as when we created the care plan, and then you could hit save, and that would add it to the care plan. Or if I wanted to, let's say, delete this one, I could go into actions. So this place items within reach to decrease risk of falls. If I no longer want that one at all, you can go to actions and you can go to discontinue, and it'll remove it. So we wanna, that's no longer applicable, we would discontinue that. So there's several ways, easy, once it's in there. You know, the creation of a care plan takes a few minutes. It'll take longer in the beginning, getting used to the system, but usually updating and things is pretty quick with like quarterly, annual, and significant change reviews. Let's see. So that is how you review. So this is the slide I went over. So again, when you're looking at that care plan, you would go through it, you know, for that quarterly, annual, or significant change. Once the care plan is created, you would go in and then mark it reviewed once you look it over and make any edits if needed there. Well, I'm going to skip this because this shows what we already did, how to get to the resident and open the care plan. There is a filter option. I don't know how well it works. I don't use it often, but you can filter life enrichment there to jump to the care plan. It didn't work really well for me for that particular resident, but it doesn't mean that's the case for every resident. But there is a filter option when you go into those care plans as well, up at the top. You can see them here in the background. This was his care plan problem there. So again, what I showed you was to choose the care plan, open it, and then expand all. We'll open that up so you can see the whole thing, the problems, goal, and approaches. And here's the snippet of the actions. So again, under actions of each section, you can make any needed edits or deletions. Just know a big thing in here is, let's say you're in the problem or the goal. If you delete, it will delete everything after that section. So if I'm in the, let's just say the goal here, and I delete it, it's going to delete all the approaches below that goal. And you'll have to add a new goal and new approaches. Or if you're in the problem, you should always, I choose discontinue. If you delete, it will delete everything below that problem. It'll delete the goal and all the approaches. So it's okay if a care plan is no longer applicable and you just want to redo it. I always tell everybody, just discontinue the whole thing, go into the problem and just discontinue, and then recreate a new one for that resident. You can also add a goal or approach. I showed you that. There are options. If usually we're not adding a goal, if anything, we're adding an approach in there for a resident. You can, the different options at the top that we saw, you can just read over the care plan, then and review it, make any edits in all three sections. So again, the problem, goal, and approaches. When you update, you have to make sure in the goal that you update the target date again for 90 days out. So every time you do a quarterly, annual, or significant change review, you want to make sure that that goal target date is pushed out another 90 days. Then you're going to mark reviewed. So the most common care plan concerns and issues when we're thinking about surveyors and or like Lana and I, like support coming in and auditing and teaching and coaching through, you know, care plan development. The main things we see or that surveyors see is that the care plan is either way too long or way too short. So that's one of the things. So the care plan doesn't include which would be a concern, all things that were noted as important to that resident in the assessment, or any kind of diagnosis that would affect their activity. You know, if they're blind or deaf or, you know, a specific physical impairment, you want to make sure that that's addressed in your care plan approaches. So just making sure it's personalized. Again, you can't just pick that template and push it forward or it's going to read. You won't know who that person is by just reading the template. The other second thing would be missing problems, approaches, or interventions. So again, the applicable diagnosis. So in those sections affecting activity, those adaptations, or how staff are to support and provide for each interest or preference. So if I like music, how am I getting to enjoy music at your facility? So is that by the TV? Is that a personal device, a radio in my room, and live entertainment? You would just want to be specific about how that need is going to be met. And then the third thing, main concern or issue, is untimely creation, review, update, revision. So again, you're going to have an MDS schedule, but that needs to be on time. So if there's an assessment reference date is what ARD means. If there's a date, let's say of today, April 6th, that means that you can do that review up to 6 days prior to April 6th. So that's a 7-day window for those that may not know that ARD date is your due date. So it's not the date. You can do it on that date and you can do it 6 days before that quarterly, annual, or significant change review. But shouldn't be after that date. So those are the main things just to pay attention to, you know, things that surveyors would look for is, you know, if it was scheduled April 6th and it's not done till April 20th, you know, they could tag us on not doing a timely review. If they're looking that closely, and we all know they can, but they don't always. So you just never know. So we want to make sure we follow those schedules. All right, I left our squirrel there because this is a lot of information. Again, you guys can go back and you'll have this to print off for your steps. But start date, again, when your campus goes live. So until then, you're continuing to use PCC, you know, process until you go live. But you will have, we just set up buddies, Trilogy Buddy system, where we will assign a Trilogy either LED or for Legacy, a seasoned Legacy leader that will be visiting your campus to be your partner through the process. So stay tuned on that, finding out who that person is and when those visits will be planned. But again, you're not alone. It's a new process and we were all there once too. So we're here to help you guys as questions come up and as this gets kicked off.